Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason. JP, another one in the bag. You know, yesterday we were talking going into that game at 12:30 and on the pre-match about 14 games to go. Just have that focus for the 14 games. I'll tell you what, if they're going to put us through the ringer like they did last night, it's going to be a tough old remaining 13 games. JP, what did you make of last night's performance?
Well, I wasn't there for a start, and criminally, I wasn't watching the game live either. I was actually at a gig. Shock. I was like, it's either a gig or football match. So yeah, I'd been invited to the La Fontaine's album launch last night, and they're good pals, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I've suddenly got a ticket for the game, because I did get offered late in the day, got offered 2 tickets from 2 different sources for the game, but I'd already committed to that, so it's not all about football. But I did get out, and Kerr, the singer, actually caught me checking my phone, and he was like, "Are you checking the Celtic score, JP?" And in front of like 100 folk, and I was like, "Aye," and then everyone was like, "What's the score?" And I went 1-0 Celtic, so that seemed to go down well with most in the room. But I saw the last 20 minutes live, and so I was just picking up. I really had no knowledge of how the game had gone before starting to watch it. 20 minutes to go. Obviously, I was aware of the score, hadn't seen the penalty, hadn't seen Hibs' goal, which was a cracker, to be fair to the guy who hit it, sweet as a nut.
That was a belter.
And I'm sure he scored a goal, maybe not similar, but from the same distance against us for Dundee United. Did he not score in that 1-1 game when we won the league?
He did. Right, okay. Aye, that rings a bell. That's the same player, right enough. Yeah, he did. That was a cracking strike.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you're tuning in at 1-1, and knowing how they played on Saturday. I was at the game on Saturday in the home end, thanks to an Acsom viewer who...
That's the first time you've been in the home end at Pretoria, am I right?
No, it's not, and this time I was actually sitting with the guy, so again, thanks very much to him for sorting me out. And I didn't realise he was a Celtic fan until the weekend. For some reason, I thought he was an Aberdeen fan, but he's a Celtic fan. So he goes undercover in the home end of Pittodrie to get a ticket. And so I'd seen what had happened on Saturday, and I just thought, is this going to be the same story again? Like, how are we going to... It didn't really look like we were going to get a goal. And obviously the substitutes you've brought on haven't been doing it from the start in previous games, i.e. Palma and Kyogo. So you didn't really have a lot of faith in them to do the business. I did want Maeda to start, and I did want Nicholas Coon to start after the weekend, because I was just like, right, I'm done with Abada in this current form, and I'm done with Palma in this current form. And then obviously Kyogo gets a chance. I mean, it comes to him fairly quickly, but you're expecting Kyogo to get a shot away at that point. I'm talking about the one where it comes to him in the middle of the box. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was really worried, because you kind of think that that's the chance. And also, the thing that's playing on your mind is Brendan Rodgers' record at Easter Road. I'm thinking back to the 0-0 game earlier on this season, where we came away with only a point after only really deciding to play with about 10 minutes to go. The first 80 minutes were largely forgettable. So then to get the penalty, and it was a penalty. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
No doubt about it.
It was a penalty, and Kyogo took a sore one in the process, and obviously good build-up play to get the shot away, the 1-2 with Matt O'Reilly. The tackle from Anthony Ralston cannot be forgotten. It was an absolute classic sliding challenge to win the ball. Fair challenge, and as Mikey Stewart pointed out on Sports Scene, if Ewan goes into the tackle with the same conviction as Ralston, he's potentially winning that ball, and they're breaking up the park on us. But that one moment where Ralston really showed that he wanted it, and then for Ida to step up into the Celtic fans, being able to probably see the whites of the eyes of a lot of the fans. Yeah. A 22-year-old kid to be able to do that. I mean, he is. I was calling him a kid. He is.
Yes,
he's half my age. So yeah, for him to be able to do that takes a lot of balls, and fair play to him, because he's come up here with maybe a bit of negative, well, not a bit of negativity, some negativity from the fan base. And as said last week, the optics of it didn't look good as signing a third choice player from Norwich City. It's not what anybody would have been thinking would be signing at the start of the window.
No.
However, as I said last week, I'd heard enough from that Norwich City podcast to tell me that he's got something about him. Now, I saw the chances that he missed. I wouldn't say they were complete sitters. I'm not sure. My mate said to me, "Oh, he'd have missed an absolute sitter," so I'm not entirely sure what one he was talking about. But he looked good. He looked good and positive, and he's done something that we've been struggling with all season, and that's score penalties. And if that had been anybody else going up to take that penalty at that moment, having not already scored a penalty in the game, you'd have been concerned. Put it this way: if Ida had been off the park and that was Lewis Palmer stepping up to take that penalty, the nerves would have been off the charts. So, look, it's not great that we struggled last night against what is by and large a poor Hibs team. They lost 3-0 at home to St Mirren at the weekend. I see my mate Matty talking about them all the time. It was sugary peg chat for Nick Montgomery on Monday from him, and you know, we've just played a team that didn't have a manager at the weekend. Now they've got one in the shape of Neil Warnock, which is quite an interesting development. But last night, yeah, it wasn't great, but a huge win. And as your tagline says, it could galvanise us. Whether or not it does is a different story. But a last-minute victory is something that spurred us on in the Ange Postecoglou season, the first season with Ralston again being involved. And I saw Ralston. My pal said to me last night as he was walking out the game, he phoned me and he said, "I don't think the players are playing for Rodgers." Right? I would beg to differ on that, having looked at the reaction from the players. You saw Ralston going up to Ida at the end, screaming, punching like his fists together. And I saw Bernardo's reaction in the background when the penalty was given after the VAR check. I just think that a nervousness has crept in where it's not really warranted. We beat this Rangers team 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's not as if like we're waiting on a game against them and we're wondering how we're going to cope against them. Pretty much the Celtic side beat that Rangers side. Okay, they had a midfielder, a defender in midfield that day, which obviously hamstrung them a little bit, but by and large, it's the same team. So yes, they've found consistency, but this nervousness that's kept in, I don't know where it's come from. Whether it's the instability in defence, possibly, and whatnot. But yeah, it was a bit of a white knuckle last night.
I think there's so many different. You couldn't put your finger on one reason for all of that you've just described there, JP. Right? I'm going to start off with Ralston. Everybody in the comment section who watches Acsom on a regular basis will know that 9-year-old me would be writing love letters to Tony Ralston and asking him for signed images, like I used to do back in the day with Paul McStay, John Collins, and yes, Andy Walker. But Tony Ralston is my favourite player. There's a great picture actually of them celebrating the goal, and it's him, McGregor, and Ida, the three of them, right? And they are absolutely buzzing. And I don't know if it happened in the challenge, but have a look at his forearm. Have a look at Tony Ralston. He's got a big gash on it. He's a warrior, right? And the other day there, JP, when Lawrence was on, he was talking about getting as many of that type of player in to try and stem this tide, as you say, that like second guessing yourself, doubting yourself, the negativity that creeps in. And I think that the only thing I can pinpoint on this is when you bring in so many players at one time. We've now got 11 new guys. We signed 11. Phillips is away back down the road. So there's 10 newbies. Or you could maybe say Awata's no new, although we just signed them. 9 new players being introduced to the dressing room, being introduced to the training pitch. That can change the dynamic, or the mood in the camp, the energy in the camp, because it's a third of your squad. You know what I mean? And I think that's massive. It's really massive. What doesn't help is that Brendan Rodgers obviously doesn't rate the vast majority of them. You look at the starting lineup last night, Palmer had kind of been the shining light from the summer, JP, and now he's gone off the boil and he's on the bench. He comes on, right, and I'll tell you, he almost sold the jerseys. So we go 2-1 up. Palmer loses possession and then gives away a foul 20 yards out of goal. Puts us under terrible pressure because we know we're really bad at defending set pieces, right? And he turns around with that wee smile on his face, and you could wring his neck as a fan. You're thinking, you don't get this, do you? You really don't get just what you need to do every single moment of every game to be a success at Celtic Football Club. He's got skill. He absolutely does have skill, JP. Nobody can, deny it. Going into last night's game, I mentioned he scored or produced a goal every 94 minutes in a Celtic jersey. That's brilliant stats. That's Kyogo level stats at the beginning of the season. Yet there's something about him. There's a lack of defensive quality, but there's a lack of discipline. And I don't mean always getting booked. That was a lack of discipline last night, giving away the ball and then giving away the foul. The ball then breaks to him, JP, and what does he do? Gives it away again. We're talking 97 minutes of the game.
This is the continuing theme on Saturday. Because of where I was sat in the ground in Pittodrie, it was high up in the Richard Donald stand. So great view of the game, unfortunately not surrounded by my own support. But there was definitely other Celtic fans in there. I could see people, sort of holding back on celebrating the equaliser.
Did they give you a wee nod, JP? Did they just give you that wee
No, I didn't make
that knowing glance?
I didn't make eye contact with anybody, really. But it's a weird experience. It's a really, really weird experience being in the home end at an away game. It's not something that I ever would feel comfortable doing it like week in, week out. But Joe Hart played an amazing pass to Lewis Palmer on Saturday. Inch perfect. Palmer brilliantly picks it out of the sky. And brings it down, and you're like, wow, great. And then 2 seconds later, just gives it away needlessly. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, to have that level of skill to do that and then not follow up with something meaningful and to be so nonchalant to lose it. And then the lead up to the Aberdeen goal, it was Palmer and Bernabei were culpable for. I thought that at the time. I was like, I remember seeing some wayward passing, and you see it back, and you're like, my God, that should have been dealt with up there. I mean, we had the ball, and then all of a sudden they're breaking on us, and Miovski obviously puts it away well, but you could tell Nawrocki was worried about doing anything because he was on a yellow. So, but yeah, I know I share your annoyance at Lewis Palmer, and I wasn't at all surprised to see him drop to the bench. And yes, apparently, hearing you and others talking after the match about Maeda and how he offered little in terms of technical prowess, but I'd still rather have him in the team than Lewis Palmer, genuinely.
Especially with Bernabei behind him. Because, listen, I've been sent loads of messages this morning, JP, about Bernabei's performance last night because I've been very critical of him.
So is everyone.
I don't see, the biggest issue here is weeks ago, we said, what happens if Greg Taylor, Joe Hart or Kyogo gets injured? We said it. What happens? Because they dropped down in quality, and at that time we didn't have Ida in the door. So, was away on international duty.
Still is.
Bernabei was the only kind of real left back rather than play somebody out of position because Mitchell Frame has got an injury. And then it was Scott Bain underneath Joe Hart. And I wouldn't have wanted to go into the game last night or at Pittodrie or indeed this weekend with any of the three players missing. But we've had to. So a lot of people are saying, and I'll bring it up once I come across the messages about Bernabei's, at least they had a fighting quality about him. Okay, absolutely, had a fighting quality about him. But, I just don't think after 11 signings, we should be looking at someone who isn't a good fit in the team. I'm going to start off, though, because, JP, I have defended Brendan Rodgers to the hilt. Of all the names that I've seen in the summer when there was speculation around who would come in as a manager, Brendan Rodgers was my pick every time. Every time, Brendan Rodgers was my pick. Some people in Acsom were saying Enzo Maresca. And by the way, it wasn't with hindsight, because I know he's done well this season. They genuinely thought it would have been a good move from Ange to Maresca, right? So we bring in Rodgers, and we know what's happened in terms of recruitment. But what I would say, right, is utilising the players that he's got at his disposal, he's made big mistakes. I think he's made big mistakes this season. And I mentioned today on a conversation on Twitter. First, Stephen Welsh injured again last night. He is getting the nod over £7.3 million of centre-half, right, that came in the summer. Ange Postecoglou didn't rate him, didn't rate Welsh, didn't think he was commanding enough. But Brendan Rodgers, in his own mind, thinks I can turn this guy into the number one centre-half. Gives him a spanking new deal. And when he's fit, he's played. But he seems to be injured all the time. I think that was a big mistake. You've got 7.4 million. How bad is Lagerbielke? Everybody goes on about his speed. How bad is he? We're going to find out, because he's going to have to get drafted back in, I'm guessing, in the coming weeks. But that's been a big mistake. So what you've then got is you've got two centre-halves who have come in. Nawrocki. Listen, I'm not writing him off either, to be honest with you, JP. There's certain elements of his game that I think he can improve on, but he's not had a right good run of games, and he's not had a good run of games alongside the same partner. And then you look at Lagerbielke, that is just an anomaly. You know, the fact that we've signed him for $3 million, he's virtually out the door. He started doing interviews with the Italian press, and we have to pull him back in. Then we get another injury to Welsh, and Lagerbielke is undoubtedly going to be on the bench this weekend, I would guess. I don't think he'll get thrown in. So that's a massive mistake. The way that we've dealt with the centre-half situation there, I think, the way Rodgers has dealt with that has not been good. You then move into the midfield. I said last season, I love Rio Hatate. I think he is a phenomenal talent, and I was looking forward to seeing how Brendan Rodgers could work with him. So what does he do? Match day one, drops him. He drops him, and he drops him for David Turnbull, who 5 months later is not even at the club. So you've made a big mistake in defence, Brendan. You made a massive mistake for me in the midfield. I know he's now injured, but what did it do to his confidence, his mood? You know, he seemed demoralised to me. So he's demoralised Lagerbielke, he's demoralised Hatate. You then move into the forward position and on the wing, right? So we bring in all these wingers, JP. Tilio, you know, Jared at Celtic Down Under's telling us how great this talent is. Most expensive export out of Australian football. He played something like 4 minutes. 4 minutes of football. You've got Rocco Vata. There's the klaxon. One of the rising stars. Refused to play him because I'm going to play Mikey Johnson. Because I can get a tune out of Mikey Johnson. He believes in his mind he can get a tune out of Stephen Welsh, David Turnbull, Mikey Johnson, right? Mikey Johnson now plays for West Brom. So it didn't work. So there's three things that haven't worked. But the biggest one, the most noticeable one, Kyogo. So we've not played to Kyogo's strengths. The wingers haven't played to his strengths. The manager's not played to his strengths. Hung him out to dry when he was asked about it. Remember, he said he's not been told to do anything differently. Then he dropped him for O. And then he dropped him for Ida. Now, by the way, Ida repaid the faith that the manager showed him. But he's a loan player. He's not even our guy. He's not even a player who we've got an option to buy at the end of the deal. And Kyogo, the top goal scorer for 2.5 seasons running, how demoralised is he? At the end of the game, you try and read it. He seemed a bit down in the dumps to me. But there for me is 4 big calls that Brendan Rodgers has got wrong this season. So I've defended him to the hilt, JP. That mood, that kind of energy can spread into other facets of the squad. I don't think we're playing with any kind of belief. I don't think we've got an identity as a team. How would you describe Ange's team? Anybody in the comment section could describe it. How do you describe Rodgers' team? You know, so it's completely different, isn't it?
Which is wild considering how we were playing going into the winter break. Because I think if you were to go back and watch, well, the Rangers game, the Dundee game, and then the St Mirren game, we scored 8 goals and conceded 1, a free kick that was, you know, right at the death. Like, so that the way we played in those games, nobody was coming out those 3 games thinking, oh, we're terrible, or this is going to be such a tight season or anything like that. It's only because of what's happened really in the play since the turn of the year, the sort of scraping a win against Ross County, who get hammered off Motherwell last night 5-0, and we're beating them 1-0 with a deflected goal in the first minute. And I know every football game is different, so it's no quite as black and white as to say, oh, well, Motherwell beat them 5-0, we should have been beating them 10-0 or something like that. It doesn't always work like that. However, that is a contribution to the way that everybody's feeling about how we're playing, because even though we won that game, people were booing at the end, you know, and never nice to hear. And then, of course, we go and drop points at Pittodrie, first game after the transfer window, which was the game that really, I think we had to sort of win to sort of really get the momentum back in our favour, and then it swung back to Ibrox on Tuesday, and I think that's how it's going to go. Really, it's going to be a case of who blinks first, to bring back an old expression. So I think I've not lost faith in Brendan Rodgers because of this. I think you're right, he has made some definite missteps. I think it's up to Kyogo, specifically Kyogo. I mean, Hatati's injured, so there's nothing we can really do about that. But with regards to Kyogo, it's more a test of his character now about how he deals with a challenge, because he's not really had a challenge. He's not had anybody threatening him. He's had a jersey every week based on his past endeavours. Abada got a jersey on Saturday based on his past endeavours. What did he offer? Nothing. Apparently, it was terrible
last night.
Apparently, it was terrible last night. I mean, like I said, I saw the last 20 minutes. What minute did he come on? Because
he only got 25. He only got 25 last night.
My nerves were shredded. I wasn't really focusing on what people were doing or not doing last night in the last 20 minutes. I was just hoping for a goal. But more so on Saturday, he was really, really poor on Saturday, to the point that I was like, well, that's him. He's not getting he shouldn't get a start on Wednesday. Coon's come on, scored a goal, looked lively. But then Coon apparently last night wasn't that great.
Disappointing last night. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of everybody said that it was a bit of an empty jersey. I think it's far too early to be sort of writing him off in that sense, but it's a bit concerning that someone that you've signed for £3 million isn't he having an instant impact in a game like last night, where you're playing an opposition that aren't on song at all, really. But it's up to Kyogo really how he deals with this, because you can either shrink and feel sorry for yourself, or you use it as motivation to prove that you are the number one guy. Because you would imagine Ida will keep his place for Sunday. I don't know how you could drop a guy.
Yeah, you would need to. Well, you're right though. We've been calling out for Kyogo to get a challenge. O's never really challenged him. I think there was 2 games this season that Brendan Rodgers decided to drop Kyogo for O, and he never took the opportunity. He didn't take the opportunity. And this far down the line, I mean, O has now been at the club for 13 months. He's not established himself. He's got time on his side, not writing him off, but he's not really made the impact that you would hope your backup striker would make. And the way you flipped that and saying about how Kyogo, we've been calling for the challenge of Kyogo all last season. In fact, I think since Giakoumakis left, we've been calling for someone to challenge Kyogo. Now he's got the challenge, and it's up to the wee fella to step up.
I thought Brendan Rodgers did go up to... I know you said something last night about the body language and everything, but I think Brendan Rodgers was going over it and say, are you all right after the challenge? And Kyogo said, yeah. Like, so I wasn't as concerned with the body language of... I was looking into the positivity of the players. Your Anthony Ralston celebrating, Palma celebrating with Ida as well. I mean, this guy's brand new, and he's already won respect of the team from not very little. He scored 2 penalties, but given the way we've struggled with penalties, that they are massive in the context of this season, because where would we be had we put away the penalties we should have put away earlier this year? I can't remember where they all came, but pretty sure they've come in games that we've dropped points.
Yeah. How many have we dropped? How many have we missed this season? 5. Have we missed as many as 5? Something like that. Yeah. No, the thing with either, you made a great point because I noticed it last night. His eye line, JP, the camera was over his shoulder, and his eye line was right in front, obviously, the Celtic support behind the goal. And you could see them. You could see them going through the ringer, like what you were. You know, you were saying that your nerves were shredded, and that's exactly what Celtic do to you. And, you know, he I don't know if he's making eye contact with them or if he's blurring them out, but the pressure. Remember the TV show Balls of Steel? Remember that? Used to be on quite late. Balls of Steel, Kutzpah, every expression you could imagine, he had it in droves last night. Callum McGregor mentioned it in the post-match as well, and he handed him the Man of the Match award, Callum McGregor, and he mentioned the fact that, the nerves that he had, he stepped up, brilliant.
Could have had a hat-trick. Could have had a hat-trick.
Absolutely. See, the one that frustrated me the most was when, he got a great chance where there was space, JP, right? And, you've got footballers who work on instinct. And if they work on instinct, they do it and it's done. And they don't think, and they don't have time to make the mistake or make the wrong choice. He second-guessed himself and he never got his shot in and he never passed the ball. And he could have done either of the two to equal effect. And he basically didn't do anything. He dilly-dallied and then he ended up having to turn round. That was the one I was disappointed with because I thought to myself, just strike it, mate. Strike it. Because, imagine I'm getting a hat-trick last night. Two's enough for us. We've won the game. But, I think promising, even against Aberdeen, I thought it was promising the fact that when Ida comes on against Aberdeen and when Kyogo comes on against Hibs, we keep the two up top. I thought that was a promising development because Rodgers seems so rigid to his shape, JP. So it's good to see, even for small periods of time, the two of them on the park at the same time. Is there a chance that he might do that against St Mirren, or do you think he's going to play it safe, Brendan, with the two up top?
I mean, they did play for a spell at Pittodrie at the weekend together, and it didn't look terrible. The idea of it is certainly good. They'll use the old adage, the big guy and wee guy sort of thing. So maybe, but I don't know. It just right now, given the performances of the wingers last night, I don't know who's playing on Sunday. I don't know who the team is. Is it probably the same team? Obviously, save for injuries. I mean, don't know how bad Johnston's.
For maybe Welsh, Novroski for Welsh.
Yeah, but I don't know
how.
Johnston, you would imagine, looked a pretty bad head knock. I mean, is there not a mandatory time that you have to be off the field after a head knock?
Sure, it will be. Yeah.
Is that a thing? So you'd imagine that would change it, but the forward line, you probably will keep the same based on the fact that it was a forward line that got a result against Hibs, although the two wingers that were on the park at the end of the game were the two guys that he dropped to be replaced by Coon and Maeda. So it is an interesting one. St Mirren, obviously, off the back of a decent victory against Hibs at the weekend. Although it's been a difficult place to go in the past, we made very light work of them in the game on the 2nd of January. That's only a month ago. So you'd like to think that we could go and do similar, but Sunday's all about the result. It's not about whether we win 3-4-0 or whatever. You just want to get through that and hope the team play through this kind of nervousness and allow confidence to come back, because there's no reason why they shouldn't be confident. They're a good enough team.
Won a treble last season.
Well, not this exact team, but they've hit heights this season that, with the majority of this team, that suggest that they can do far better than they're doing right now.
100%. And another conversation I've been having, people going about not replacing Starfelt, Moy and Jota like for like with the same level of quality. But I think you can go a bit deeper, because over a number of transfer windows, JP, if you don't get enough quality or experience back in the door, eventually 3 or 4 transfer windows down the line, it starts to show. And I think that's where we are. So if you go to the beginning of Angie's time, there's the Ange Klaxon, getting stick for that yesterday. We lost, obviously, big players at the beginning of that tenure. Eduard, Christie, Ayer. Ayer never played for Ange, but the other two did. And then we lost at the end of the season, Beaton and Rodgick, quite surprisingly. So bags and bags of experience out the door. And then from last season's team, like you quite rightly say, Moy, Starfelt, Jota, Giakoumakis and Juranovic, that's 10 players. That's 10 players over a period of 2 years who were big players for Celtic. There was bags of quality there, bags of experience. And what we've done is we've more or less replaced them, not like for like, but we've brought in a lot of young, inexperienced players. Who would you say has replaced the departed player? Maybe an argument about Johnston. I know he's not been at his best this season, but maybe an argument about Alistair Johnston. But for every other position, I don't think we have. I mean, if you're going to go as far back as right, Edouard was replaced by Kyogo, yeah, I think that's sufficient, right? Who replaced Ayer at centre half for Celtic? Carter Vickers, aye, that's sufficient. But when you start moving in, we have lost a lot of experience as well as quality. And eventually, maybe 4 transfer windows in, if you've not had a good run of it in the transfer and the recruitment, then you come to the point, JP, where there's a bit of a dearth of experience and or quality. I think that's where we are.
Well, this is something that was put to me on Saturday. I did the post-match with Melly from 20 Minute Tims on Saturday, and he was right behind the whole sack the board movement, or not movement, because it isn't really a movement, it's just a chant at the moment. That's all it is to me. Until I see something a bit more concrete, I'll put my hat on it. But I don't personally see the point in sacking the board right now. So we just turn around today and sack the board. Then what? Then we're left looking for people to come and do a job. The problem that he pointed out to me was the recruitment team, and I said something like, "Oh well, Mark Lawwell's got the summer to basically save his job." But in actual fact, as Melly pointed out, this is going back 2-3 transfer windows, and you've pointed that out before as well. So there's 2 things on that. One is Brendan Rodgers spoke very interestingly last Thursday in the press conference about the need to move up a bracket in terms of the players that are being looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So if the player, say there was a filter and it was 2 to 4 million was the players that he was being presented with, and he just went through them all and went, nah, I don't want any of these because they're no better than what we've got, and I don't see them coming in and being a first team player for Celtic, which is what, if we're spending money properly, that's what we should be spending money on, i.e. Carl Starfelt, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Jota, Alistair Johnston and the rest. So the one thing that would make me think differently about what's been presented to him is if they did adjust the filters and moved the filters to between 4 and 7 million or something like that. And then surely the chances of there being players in the lists that are presented to Brendan Rodgers, the chances of there being players on that list that he'll be like, yep, I want him, let's go and get him, or let's go and get him.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the case that that's what we need to do and therefore that will then improve us? Or is it just the case that they're not very good at their job in terms of recruitment? They're not very good at finding the gems that we need to find, Matt O'Reilly's, Van Dijk's, these type of players, or even not even as valuable as them, like even just a Juranovic, where you have a player that you sign for 3.5-4 million and then sell for 10. You don't need to be looking for the big bucks every single time. Like if we could get 2 seasons out of a 4 or 5 million pound player to then sell them for 10-12 million to a Spanish league, that's good business. Especially if you're selling them at 27, 28 or whatever it is Juranovic was. So I think that's the 2 questions I would have is does it give the manager more food for thought if you move the parameters up and you're going to try and spend bigger, because that is what we ultimately need to do to improve this team. Yep. So it's either that or they're just not very good and they've not got the right connections, they've not got the right contacts, they've not got scouts in the right places. All completely speculative on my part. I don't know. They could turn around and be like, what are you saying? You don't know anything. But the evidence that we've been presented with in terms of the players that have come to the club in the last 2 years, it's not really. Make a call on it. It's not really. It's not looking good for them, is it?
No, no. And they would turn around regardless and say, what do you know? But I can tell you, you know, you can speculate or you can speak to people, and that's what I love doing. And I spoke to a great number of people at the St. Roch's game, for example, connected with the whole process, JP, and it is pretty clear that we're not following something as structured as what you've even just mentioned. We're buying players based on recommendations, be that recommendations through previously the City Group. I mean, Tillio, even as recently as Tillio, he's a City Group connection, yeah, and he's gone back to the City Group. And also agent recommendations, whereby Starfelt's agent recommends Lagerbielke, and he's not going through that filter. They're not checking his metrics. They're not checking if he's fast enough for the incoming manager, Rodgers, who wants his defenders, as can be seen last night from the stats, to be able to play loads of short passes. And if you're not good at short passing, you're not going to play for him. So Lagerbielke was a terrible fit, and it was because we haven't gone through a stringent process that you've just described. So when it comes to data-driven recruitment, that gives you a shortlist. It doesn't sign you a player, like you say. So if you're looking for a left back and you put in that, right, I'm willing to spend up to £7 million on this left back, like you say, 4 to 7, right? And he needs to be under the age of 25, and this is his wage bracket. And you get 130, and they're playing in Europe. 136 players come up on your screen because it is a data system that they're using, JP. And then you start looking at the performance metrics, right? He's only 5'8". He's an inch smaller than Greg Taylor. We don't want to buy him. We want someone with a bit of height, physicality, speed. They've got to be good in the aerial duels because we're terrible at set pieces. All these things are basic. Fans can tell you what we need, right? And then once you put the metrics in, it takes you from 136 players maybe to 12 players. Then the scouting team comes in and goes and watches them. And that maybe halves it again. And then you've got a proper short list of players. The gaffer, like Andrew Postecoglou used to do, he looks at them in the whites of the eyes and sees, are they hungry? Have they got the passion? Have they got the mentality to play for Celtic? And at that point, you make your call based on what the manager wants. We're not doing any of that. We're absolutely not doing that. In the past, I think Ange had a really good insight into certain markets that we hadn't utilised or hadn't utilised for a long time, and it worked for him. But some of those players aren't really the type of players that the board like. So if you look at Giakoumakis, Juranovic and Starfelt, their age profile, JP, means that when we sold them, we didn't make 10 million per player. We might have made $1 million here or there. But the thing is, they brought in the experience that we needed at that time to steady the ship. We went on to win a double and then a treble on the back of that kind of thought process. In the summer there, quite clearly, we tried to buy 9 guys that would make us a profit. Other than, in fact, Nat Phillips aside, we tried to buy players that we could turn a profit on. They were all guys for the future. They were not ready for the first team. And I think he's got a bit of a tune to Palma for parts of the season, but he's shown his deficiencies in recent weeks, especially when the chips are down. He just disappears. And last night, the discipline was horrendous. You mentioned Abada. He was bad as well, and he should know better because he's known nothing but success in a Celtic jersey. 97 minutes on the clock, he gets the ball at the halfway line, and he literally kicked the ball out of play. He kicked it into no man's land, and it went out for that. So he's given away possession, put us back on the back foot, JP. And you're looking at things like that. That's just a lack of discipline. But yeah, the recruitment is terrible. And if they want to turn in and say, what do you know about recruitment? I can see it with my eyes that last night was probably one of the biggest examples of Brendan Rodgers not playing the guys that signed in the summer.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a banner last night, but I totally agreed with the banner on Saturday, which said Celtic board on your heads be it, because this is playing out in front of us, the reality of the poor transfer window in the summer, because the January one, okay, we got 2 players and never really thought we were going to get first team players at £4, £5, £6 million coming in, although it can happen. I just didn't see it. I certainly can't believe we didn't sign a backup left back, given that Greg Taylor's injury occurred in the transfer window at a time when we could do something, and there was nothing. There was no shortlist to call upon, whether it was a stopgap or anything other than, we didn't need to go out and spend 5 to 10 million on a left back. Could have just got somebody in until we had a target identified in the summer or whatever, but somebody to come in, because fortunately, when he was asked about it in the presser the other day, he said, we'll look at Greg Taylor for the weekend but if not the weekend, he should be back for the following week. That's fine, but like there's obviously, as you and I and everybody else knows, players don't always come back from injury on time. And if they do come back on time, there's no guarantee that they're not going to break down again. So we were genuinely rolling the dice on that. And we recruited badly in the summer, recruited badly in the window before that and the window before that. So therefore, gets to May and we don't win this league, then there is a huge target on those at the top, because they've employed these people to recruit and they've given the list of players that they've given to the manager. And if it has been only of a certain bracket, then that means that they have penny pinched, whether that's Peter Lawwell coming back. I really wish you could know in black and white if he has impacted this at all, or if it is just he's like this sort of spectre that's there that doesn't actually say or do anything, but just the fact that he's there, it's like, oh, we better not spend that because Peter will get on at us for spending over $4 million on a player. Like, in my mind, that idea of that is nonsense. Although I know people truly believe that, but the target does get aimed at them if we fail, because we should not be in a position where we're failing. It's as simple as that. And that's not entitlement. That's not being demanding. That's fact. Like, we won a treble last season. We should be coming in. They've sacked their manager in November. And he's now wanting the club that he's moved to. Most of their fans want him out as well. So we've got a jump in them from that. So I don't buy into the fact that we shouldn't be streets ahead of them right now.
Absolutely, JP. I mean, by the end of the year, and by the end of the season, rather, we could be in a scenario where we've got in and around the £100 million mark. I mean, we're talking Scrooge McDuck territory here, where you've got a cellar in money and you can just go for a swim in it now and again. What's the point in that? We're not reinvesting it in the stadium. I was up at Celtic Park this morning doing a delayed Wander Round Paradise. We delayed it because I wanted to get the Hibs game in there. Thankfully, I was talking about a victory. But you walk around Celtic Park, there is so much that could be done in the stadium. Yeah, there's going to be an upgrade to the Barrafield site. I get it. But in terms of what you're actually seeing on the park, I said it the other week there after the Martin O'Neill gig. I said sometimes put the money on the park. Not all the time. JP, you can't spend like that for 4 transfer windows on the bounce, but sometimes put the money on the park, because I think we're scrimped and scraped. I don't think there would have been any urgency from the Celtic board going into January like there is with you, me, and loads of the people in the comment section, which I'll get to ASAP. It's just that once JP and I start, we tend to run with it. But there's no sense of the urgency from the board members, because they do sit there and look at us as being entitled, demanding, greeting-faced fans, even though it's fans like us that bring the money to the table that then gets locked in a big cellar that doesn't get used. There's no point. I like the fact that your club's stable, right? Financially secure. But you don't need £70 million for that, JP. You don't need £100 million for that. You absolutely don't. I mean, it's not like we're going to release another 3 or 4 jerseys next season and no Celtic fan's going to buy them. It's not like we're going to announce the renewals of season tickets and nobody's going to buy them. There's going to be that big influx again. But you've got to be successful for that to continue and the feel-good factor to continue. When Neil Lennon was appointed the Celtic manager first time round, him and Peter Lawwell, people who are involved in Celtic supporters clubs may remember, they went on a road trip. They went on a road trip to drum up interest in Celtic season tickets. And I remember they went to Greenock and it was almost like a panel show, JP, where Peter Lawwell's there, Neil Lennon's there to drum up interest in the club. They don't have to do that at the moment. We're on a wave of success. And we are at a risk, I think, we're in a title race where we're seriously at risk of losing the title. That could happen. Next week, Rangers are playing one of the worst teams I've seen in the Premiership in recent times in Ross County, and they're managerless, right? So how many managers are they going to have this season? They're going to...
Eric Adams, I only found out this morning. How long did he last? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? Surely
half a dozen games.
Surely one of the shortest ever managerial spells.
He was moaning for the minute he came in, JP. He was moaning about the job he had. Unbelievable scenario to be in. they're going to have 3 managers in one season. At the beginning of the season, on the first Wonder Round Paradise, I said Rangers, Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts will all change their manager this season. And they all have, except for Hearts at the moment. And they seem to be doing okay. But we shouldn't be in this position. It's not a situation where we're here, oh, how did that happen? We've been talking about it every single step of the way. It's not as though we didn't see it coming. I'm keen to get as many of you involved as well on the comments. Jungle Lion, too many times this season we've said this. This is it. It starts from here. Absolutely. I said that, I think I said that the week of the Hearts game. Right, whatever's happened before now, let's draw a line and let's go. And then obviously we got beat. And then you then look at the games running up to the Rangers game. Right, okay, we need to win these 2 games leading up to the Rangers game. And then so we are on a run, but the performances have not been good enough. Ian Roy, thank you for supporting the channel. Always appreciated. And Stephen Sloan, how does a recruitment team manage to find a conveyor belt of wingers that can't beat a man across the ball? Recruitment data, Stephen. Comes down to data, doesn't it? I mean, all that information is available to you, JP, on the systems that elite or so-called big clubs use. Celtic should be able to tell if a player can get past the man, can hit the byline and cross the ball in the way that Kyogo likes them to cross it in. And if it doesn't tell you in the metrics and in the data, your scouts will tell you that. Yeah, we've bought all these wingers who can't do it. So Stephen Sloan makes a good point. We've spent £10 million on wingers who don't play the system that was successful.
Well, as Brendan Rodgers said in the interview, you don't know, you can't, there is no metric for heart or desire or courage, confidence. Like
bravery. I was talking about bravery, wasn't he?
Those like, I mean, Abada was constantly cutting inside and not going down the line against Ross County at home, and that's why we weren't getting chances. We should have put way more than a 1 goal past Ross County at home, let's face it. And if you have your wingers on song, you've got a guy up front who is a proven goal scorer and would have been putting them away. So the winger thing, whatever you look at in terms of the data, doesn't tell you what you find out about a player once they're out in the cold in front of 60,000 people who demand success and demand 100% every game. They don't want, you know, a trick here or there and then no goal, no end product or an assist. You know, you need more than that. You need, if you've shown you can do it once, you should be doing the same thing every week. I believe if you're getting paid that level of money, there shouldn't be ups and downs. If you know a player's good enough to produce the goods, it's why you get frustrated at players, because you've seen them do it. The only thing is, there's players that are there now that haven't done it for quite a while, in terms of probably Abada being the main one. And whether that is to do with his personal situation, whether that's affecting him or not, some people would argue that he never had it and he was just had a knack of getting in the end of things, but he didn't actually possess any real trickery or skill, which is kind of what you need to have as a winger more often than not. So I don't know, that's an issue, and whether or not it's one that could have been dealt with in the January transfer window, I don't know, or whether it's going to be looked at in the summer, whether or not he'll move in the summer because of the pressure that's been put on him by people back home or whatever, or whether he's unhappy. I don't know. The
thing with Abada, he was one of the players, JP, that when we signed him, very quickly he's talking about getting a big move elsewhere. You know, I think Coon spoke about that as well. We got his big move actually to St Mirren, but Abada was talking about that as soon as he came in the door. And for the first 2 seasons, I would say that Abada was, for me, at the age of him, I thought he was an incredible signing. But you know, if that cycle comes to an end, be that through his own ambition to play somewhere else, or because of the situation in his homeland, and he's getting a lot of pressure from people in the international team, etc., friends, people who can influence him, then the time to sell him would have been probably in January. But I think the club are probably looking at that and thinking we can't maximise the price for him in January, so we're going to hold on to him. And we're going to burn ourselves again, because we know what happens if you keep a player against their will almost. You know, Edouard, for example, or Ayer or Christie. If you keep these guys for one season too long, as we did in the 10 in a row season that never happened. Then you get the performance because the head's checked out. The head's out the door, JP, and their shoes should follow. Now, listen, you last week sent me a brilliant wee video, which I've not shared on the socials. It was just one of the personal things that you sent me, not that kind of personal. And you're at King Tut's, and it was the Glory in the Dream. And it was the first time it has ever been played live by the Wakes. Now, you've got to take a bit of credit for this, actually, if you want to dive deeper into the roots of me knowing Paul, because he's a long-time friend of yours, Paul Sheridan, of course, and us asking them, after a meeting with JJ Gilmore and speaking to JJ Gilmore, who was a co-writer of the song, along with Gary John Kane from the Proclaimers, JJ wanted the Wakes to cover it. He wanted the Wakes to cover the song. For anybody who's never heard the story, in a nutshell, what happened was JJ Gilmore, formerly of the Silencers, he was also in East 17, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. He was
Did not know that, no.
He replaced Brian Harvey for a spell in East 17, wrote some songs with Tony Mortimer. Don't know where
Did they ever play live?
I think he did, mate.
Wow.
You
look that up.
And Gary John Kane, who had played with the McCluskey brothers, and he's been the bass player of the Proclaimers now for over 20 years. They wrote a song for Celtic. Celtic were going to release it as an official track for the centenary season. It was called The Glory in the Dream. And it was finally overlooked for the Celtic rap. Celtic released the Celtic rap instead. JP's heard it, hence the reason he's laughing. But The Glory in the Dream, it existed as a demo. And on that demo was JJ, Gary John, one of Gary's brothers, I think it was maybe Pat from Hue and Cry was on there, one of the McCluskey brothers, a whole collection of Scottish acts were on this demo. And Gary John just mentioned it, like, when I was talking to him on Acsom one day, that they'd done this, and I was like, do you have the song? That's the kind of stuff, JP, that I love. Unseen archives, all that kind of stuff. And he had it, he sent me the demo, we then got permission. JJ Gilmore, and back in the day, he wanted Christy Moore to sing the song. And if you listen to the demo, I know, if you listen to the demo, it sounds like a Christy Moore song. The club wanted Richard Jobson to sing it. Now, Richard didn't know this, but the club wanted Richard Jobson to sing it. Nobody sang it. It lay in the vault. We resurrected it, re-recorded it with the Wakes featuring Carly Connor. And JP Mason last week saw and experienced it played for the first time. I built this really up. Can you come back and say it was all right? I've built it up now, JP. How was it to be at King Tut's and see it come in full circle?
No, it was great because as I stood there and I hadn't looked at their set list, I knew that they were playing for the thick end of 2 hours. Because Paul had said how long they were going to play for, but I hadn't looked at the set list, so I didn't know for a fact that they were playing it. So when he announced it and dedicated it to me and Chris in the room and Acsom, because obviously Chris is a Celtic fan as well, and he was doing the lights and I was repping the show, so it was a really cool moment. And I was thinking of like you going, wow, you've kind of like had an impact in changing the course of history, not in a massive way or anything, but just in the case of like, this wouldn't be happening right now had it not been for the work that you did with him and getting them on board to do the single. And just the simple kernel of the idea. So that in itself, so I immediately started filming it because I was like, I should film this. Kind of a big deal. And I knew it would mean a lot to you because, you know, a song getting played in a sold out King Tut's is a pretty cool moment, and amazing. Yeah, it went down well, and so did Fields of Athenry, You'll Never Walk Alone, Bella Ciao. It was a great set. It was proper, and they had a great time. I think they did 2 nights. I'm pretty sure they would happily come back for a third. Such was the buzz. So everybody else had a good time, and no nonsense. The bar staff said to me, couldn't they believe how nice the crowd were? And I was just like, well, that says a lot, doesn't it?
When's your Oasis tribute band?
Tomorrow night. With Eric Mecco. Declan did an interview with him.
That's all that.
See that? Yeah.
Brilliant.
Declan did an interview with him for Glasgow World. So I'm looking forward to it. They've got a Stone Roses tribute band supporting called Resurrection.
Yes.
Don't know anything about them.
Are they not from your neck of the woods? I'm sure they're from Bathgate or something.
Are they from West Lothian, are they?
Yeah.
I'll need to find out tomorrow night when I meet them. But that's tomorrow night. It should be a good laugh for a Friday night in Tuts, and it'd be interesting to meet Eric Demeco. What a random encounter. I've had a few, but that's definitely possibly the most random.
He won the Champions League, didn't he? He won the Champions League.
Yeah. They're so excited about playing Tuts as well. I mean, I've been emailing them about just organising the night and stuff, and they're all like mega buzzing to be playing Tuts because it's, well, for obvious reasons, I think just to be in the dressing room, that they know that Oasis were once in many years ago. But it's quite weird. He won the Champions League in the same year that Oasis played Tuts for the first time. It was 93.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
JP.
That didn't dawn on me until I read Declan's article, when I was like,
did Declan mention that, did he?
Aye.
Nice one. So I'm trying to think now. When was the Tuts gig? Was it March or May?
May 31st, 1993.
May 31st. And your Champions League final would have been the same month, possibly.
Yeah.
That's wild. Full circle. Love it. Get your Celtic Tuts. Is it sold out yet? Tomorrow night?
It's not. There's still tickets available. So if you want to come along and sing Oasis along with a slightly French tinged lead singer, French tinged accent lead singer that I can't even speak, but you know what I'm trying to say. The guy, he does have a slight French tinge to his Liam Gallagher, which is in itself quite amusing and pretty cool as well.
It is cool. If you want to see a bit of French swagger, go to King Tuts tomorrow night. I'll be in Belfast with Jackie and Sid tomorrow night. Look forward to speaking to Paddy Lavery, who I seen in the comments earlier. Kevin Mullen, afternoon. Acsom papering over the cracks. Big problems at Celtic. Rangers are favourites for the league. They look more together than we do. Abada was a waste of a jersey. He clearly wants away. He did not play well last night. Jim Edgar, surprised Brendan didn't hook Coon. I'm bringing this up because I want to know what your thoughts are on what to do with Coon here. After 30 minutes, he was poor. He looked out of his depth. The players stopped passing to him when they figured he wasn't going to take his man on. I think the first thing I noticed about him was Hibs were more of a threat in the first half down Coon's side, right? And obviously we had the issue with our first choice right back being injured in the first 9 minutes of the game. Ralston, who I think is a solid replacement, but we were a wee bit dishevelled and a bit disjointed. And Coon had to do a bit of defending, JP. And it goes back to a point you made before. It's like, all these guys have been the best at the previous team, but the previous team aren't a team of winners. So if you do something pretty spectacular, score a goal, set up a goal with the outside of your boot, you can Instagram it for the rest of the week. But at Celtic, it's not about that. It's about 19 minutes of discipline, working, making sure you're switched on. That's the mentality we're talking about. And I think Coon probably got a bit of a wake-up call last night with regards to the fact that it wasn't about jinking past players. It was about tracking players, making sure you were goal side, tackling players, tracking back, covering for Ralston when he was overlapping. And he looked like a fish out of water. But in saying all that, JP, I don't know how it would be received if he was to be dropped back out. I don't know if that would be a good move, particularly when Abada came on and he was completely ineffectual. In fact, he was poor when he came on.
Yeah, I just thinking about it as you were talking there, I don't think he will drop him on Sunday because it's not a very good look, is it, to start a player? Fair enough, he doesn't finish the match, but it's a victory. So ultimately, he played the majority of the game. Okay, he may not have played that well, but I think you've got to give someone another opportunity. I mean, Abada's had quite a few opportunities of late, and he's had several, and it's not as if he played like one bad game and then had an okay game and then a good game. He's pretty much had 3 poor games since the winter break.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would say Coon probably deserves to be given another shot on Sunday there's going to be discussions have been had about the game last night between Brendan Rodgers and the player. The player will surely go through individual things from the game and things we pointed out to him that he did well and didn't do well. And you'd hope that that's what happens after games, is players analyse the performance either themselves or with the management team or the coaching staff, to then be like, right, this is what you don't do and this is what you do. So hopefully that's reflected in what he does on Sunday.
You know, I always think back to Victor Wanyama, and I remember coming home from a game that we were playing at home, and he was rotten. He was really, and everybody around about me was saying how bad he was, and everybody on the bus back was going on about how bad a footballer he was. And then we done that event recently with Charlie Mulgrew and Mark Wilson. Charlie Mulgrew said that Victor Wanyama, when he started training with Celtic, he didn't even look like a footballer, JP. It looked as though there had been some kind of con. You know, remember Graham Souness was conned when he was at Southampton? I forget his name. And he was presented with some guy who couldn't play. He said that's how bad Wanyama was. And we know what he became. You know, and it's all about sometimes just building that confidence up in the guy, and giving him the game time. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what the alternative is at the moment, because Palmer has been playing really poor. Abada's been poor. Vata's come on for a couple of cameos. I don't think he's ready to start in the cup. You know, it could all go terribly wrong, and then you start using people as scapegoats. So I would keep Coon in there. Jerry N, before we go, the last point you're going to make is the Beatles are just a 60s version of Oasis. There you go, Jerry. I never got the Beatles thing with Oasis. I know they constantly went on about them. I know they always mentioned them and they were influenced by them, but I didn't hear it in the music, JP, personally.
Aye, there's a fair bit of it, but I mean, the Oasis wouldn't exist without a band called The Real People. Like, if you've never listened to The Real People, listen to The Real People's debut album. They've only got 2 records. I think they released a second one years and years later with the material that could have been their second album at the time. But yeah, 2 brothers in the band, and I don't know if you know this. You will know the story about them recording late night with Liam. Like the first time Liam ever sang in a studio was because the Real People let him into their studio, and he sang through a mic in a studio, and they all just kind of looked at each other as if to say, this guy's voice is amazing and they're going to be big. But they had like a late night stoned / drunken session where they wrote some tunes, and Columbia was one of the songs that came out of that. And there's quite a bit of their album that Noel Gallagher has blatantly ripped off, as he has done with other stuff like T-Rex and Slade and all the bands that he was listening to probably in the 70s growing up. He's nicked riffs left, right, and centre. So there's I think is maybe is it Don't Look Back in Anger? There's a direct rip of a Beatles. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there's no way that Oasis are Oasis as we know them without the Beatles. I don't think. I mean, John Lennon.
I know. I mean, Liam actually for a spell thought he was reincarnated as Liam Gallagher. What I would say about The Real People is, if you're into that kind of thing, go on to YouTube and listen to a song called Feel the Pain, right? Because that was a song that the Griffiths brothers actually went legal on, because Noel had ripped it off to such a degree they were taking it to court, but they couldn't actually continue with the legal fees, and they got an out-of-court settlement. But basically, it's Don't Go Away. And
Don't Go Away, say that you'll stay forever in a day. He rips the entire line. Aye, that's right.
Yeah, so go and listen to that. Just a wee bit of music to keep you going at the end of yet another brilliant Thursday Bulletin with JP Mason. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. 1300 live on a Thursday afternoon. Anyone in the Belfast area, come along and see us with Jackie McNamara and Simon Donnelly tomorrow night. I'm really looking forward to that one. And tomorrow, due to my travel, James McKenzie will be hosting the show with Alan Morrison and Kevin Graham. All that's left for me to say is give us a wee thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.